So, dudes, welcome to the Cookout, episode 2. We're talking about vaccines. This is my friend Pat. He mods my Twitch chat as well as Discord. He may have banned you. He probably did. And he may ban you one day.
You should be honored.
Yeah. You'll never really know. Also runs a very successful Discord server.
Also has spaghetti in his teeth.
A tech savant. Truly. Witcher enthusiast. CD Projekt.
That's true.
CD Projekt Red game that is not cyberpunk enthusiast.
Right. Well, I haven't played it, but it doesn't look great.
I played like 14 hours of it. It's all right.
Oh,
you know what else is? Oh, well, there you go. Was that cyberpunk you had on your screen right there?
Yeah, that was actually in a Mana stream, Greg, because I'm trying to get the Twitch glitch pet. I don't know if
Are you trying to become an Among Us professional, competitive Among Us player?
Absolutely not. But I want the pet.
I'm already tired of it. I was tired of it like 3 weeks after the game came out, and then I'm still tired of it.
I'm not tired of it yet, but we'll get there, I'm sure.
You know what else I'm tired of? People thinking that Bill Gates is going to put a microchip in you if you take a COVID-19 vaccine.
I thought you were just going to say coronavirus, but yeah.
I am tired of that as well. And what is that phenomenon? Pandemic fatigue. I think a lot of people are there. I think a lot of people are happy that a vaccine is coming around the corner. But now it seems that it's kind of come up for contentious debate because people are very skeptical about it. So the goal of this show, I think the goal of this episode is to go through some of the skepticism that could be warranted or perhaps unwarranted. We're not here to judge that necessarily as much as we're trying to see what people are skeptical of and analyze it and discuss it. So anyway.
So
great great transition. So there's a number of different.
I just wanted to let that sit.
There's a number of different claims. I'm trying to keep from like over talking people. I had a podcast that I did with Zeronic and Get Flanked from Logic Bomb, the show. I don't know. I don't think, did I send you that? I don't think I sent you that.
I don't think so.
So there was an audio.
Zeronic and Get Flanked?
Yeah. Okay. So there was an audio desync thing that made it seem like I was like jumping ahead of the conversation a lot and like trying to talk over everybody, because there were points where like people would ask me questions and then I would magically know what specifically they were asking me before they finished their sentence and then answer their question for them, which I think was probably, to most people, should have been a cue that there was some kind of audio problem. But it also made me look like a real dickhead in some instances, and somehow no one seemed to call me out on it for the rest of the show. So now I'm trying to kind of be conscientious about that, but I'll do my best, Pat. If I cut you off,
I don't even know where to start. I mean, there's either the silence was because what is there to say about the vaccine? It's real. It's here. You should get it.
Is that just the theme of the show? Is Joe Biden president? Yes. Should you get a vaccine? Yes.
Yeah, speaking of which, the Electoral College certified the results today, so the Congress just has to count them.
No, they didn't. Courts don't decide. Courts don't decide elections. Wait, never mind.
No, courts do decide elections. People don't.
People decide elections. But you just said, fuck. I really hate that that's the nuance of the conversation now. I really do, because there's no way to say, there's no way to be neutral on some of these topics without coming off as either misinformed or just trying way too hard to be a contrarian, I think.
Yeah,
is the issue.
You had a lot of mixed reactions to like Matthew McConaughey saying he was aggressively centrist. You had a lot of people being like, wow, way to like you're fence sitting so hard the poll's going up your ass. But
me personally,
people were into it too.
I won't tolerate any Matthew McConaughey slander on this program myself. I can't speak for other people, but I do get where people are coming from. I'm not completely out of the loop, right? Like, as soon as I read that he described himself as aggressively centrist, I saw that and I went, oh boy.
Yeah.
It's gonna be a lot of people reacting to that. And then you read the substance of what he said, and I think there was a very deliberate effort by him, because that country accent of his is authentic. He's not faking that.
Well, it is the kind of unification we need right now. Like, if Matthew McConaughey, as an aggressively centrist person, got the vaccine, people on both sides could be like,
we really need more people with
trust him.
We need more people with country accents to tell other people with country accents that Joe Biden is going to be the next president and maybe get a vaccine. Because I'm not even necessarily saying Joe Biden is the next president and you should be okay with it. And fuck you if you don't like it. Like, not even that.
Right. That's not the.
Just saying this fact exists, and then you don't need to embellish it any more than that. You should just be able to say that and not get shit for it. I think it's really important.
Yeah.
But go on.
Go ahead. I was gonna say, speaking of Biden and the vaccine, he has made a promise in the last few days to do 100 million shots in the first 100 days. So a million vaccinations per day.
Oh boy, the 100 days.
The
100 days.
Promises. But I mean,
we'll see.
I think the math kind of does work out. I forgot how many. I think it's 2.9 million are coming the first week. And well, no, the math doesn't work out then.
Just kidding. Can the whole episode. We can't.
Can the whole episode.
And literally unwatchable. There's a number of different claims that people are making. There are claims that I've had arguments with people that I consider pretty close to me about not even just the efficacy of the vaccine itself. For the majority of the episode, we're going to be talking about the Pfizer and Biontech. That's the company. Sounds like something out of a sci-fi movie. Which is more indicative of how it's a dystopian future novel, whatever the hell you want to call it.
Biontech
really
sounds like Skynet.
Scaring the shit out of people, yeah.
But we're going to be focusing on the Pfizer vaccine because that's the one that just got emergency use authorization from the FDA.
Yeah, and that
Moderna
seems like
will be quick on its heels.
That seems like it's going to be the one that will be in the news cycle for at least the immediate future, in the U.S. at least. There's also the AstraZeneca vaccine that was, I believe, recently. Did they start distributing that in the UK, or is it like they haven't distributed it, but they like merged with Sputnik, the Russian vaccine, and they were going to take those two together and try to make like I have no idea how any of that works.
I'm less familiar with the AstraZeneca one, because like Pfizer and Moderna are the ones that are fast tracked to approval here, and Pfizer's just been approved Friday, and we're filming this Monday, the 14th. And Moderna is expected to be approved within the week. So we're going to have some vaccinations. West Virginia, where we are, is getting 36,000 the first week. I heard Louisiana's getting 39,000. And so it's going to be basically based on population. And Pfizer's the one that needs to be really cold. It's stored at negative 70 degrees Celsius. So very, very cold.
That is,
and it's like
absurdly cold
immediately.
Yeah.
Absurdly cold.
It's obviously very important that vaccine distribution is done in order to counter any disease. But for some reason, this one, because this is where we're at in 2020, everything is controversial. Scientific consensus, scientific facts are controversial. People are very skeptical about taking it. There's a lot of different claims. One claim that I've heard going around, and I've actually gotten into it with people before, like I said, on this topic, is this idea that it can change your genetic makeup, or it can alter your genetic material, or it's like, oh, it's made of genetic material, so it, fucks with your body or your DNA or whatever in some kind of way, most of which are either not quite on the mark or completely off of the mark, depending on how Fallout 76 you're willing to go with it in terms of like, oh, they're gonna inject you with a fucking like gene that'll cause like a mutation or something, which is not. It's calling it a DNA vaccine is an important distinction because because most vaccines that we're familiar with, like the one that you would take for smallpox or measles, those aren't DNA vaccines. This is a this is a relatively new concept, but not a completely new concept.
Right. Most traditional vaccines have been viral vector vaccines, where you inject basically like a weakened and often modified version of the virus that will kind of naturally produce antibodies, whereas this one, and it scares people calling it a DNA vaccine because they're like, oh, it'll alter your DNA, but it's not. As we know, it's not DNA at all. It's like it's RNA, it's mRNA, and so it's like changing. It's essentially, I suppose I'm getting a bit ahead of myself, but the end result of both types of vaccines are the same. You want to produce T cells and B cells that recognize the proteins on the outside of the coronavirus, and they attack it as if it's an intruder. And it works the same way, whether or not you're doing an RNA vaccine or a viral vector vaccine.
Yeah, and now that we're on the topic, I'll make sure to leave in the description of this video links to other videos and other sources that I did a fair amount of research, not like a whole lot, not as much as a medical student would do, naturally, because that takes several years.
Right, we're not experts on this by any means.
Enough to get the concept across, right? Like the big picture ideas about what makes this vaccine, the methodology of testing the vaccine, as well as the methodology of how the vaccine works compared to a viral, what's the viral vector?
Viral vector is the word that I've been reading.
Which sounds like an anime character, but
yes,
that's basically where we're at. We're in an anime as it is, so it's kind of simple enough. So it alters DNA. That's one claim. It's that Bill Gates. There's a whole Bill Gates thing. Bill Gates is putting microchips in people to track your location. As if you don't carry this around with you wherever you go. Now, if you're the kind of person who doesn't have one of these things, and you don't want to take a vaccine because you're concerned about a microchip, good on you. It
makes more sense.
Truly good on you. I think that's more intellectually honest than the alternative, which is most people, already, what do you want to call it, plugged in and ignoring vaccines because they think they're going to put a microchip in you. It's so weird. You can spend a whole episode just looking at a rabbit hole of not just vaccine conspiracy theories, but also conspiracy theories pertaining to COVID in particular. It's very popular, this whole Bill Gates thing with like the Alex Jones crowd.
Well, you already have like this, excuse me, bird, this big like anti-vax community that they say there's mercury or like excessive amounts of aluminum in the vaccines, and they're gonna give your kids autism and they're gonna kill you, and I'm gonna kill my birds. But
at least not before the cat does.
But not before the cat does. But you have a lot of like unique new concerns specifically about the COVID vaccine. And I mean, like, we've already gone over the main one, which is the like DNA vaccine label. But it's very interesting how there's been a lot of surveys saying that like between like 40 and 50% of Americans are not going to get the COVID vaccine for like months and months after it's available because they still don't feel like it's been tested enough or it's not safe enough. And so rates of like vaccine uncertainty are just so much higher than they usually are with any other vaccine in history, basically. And, it's obviously political or been politicized. But it's a perfect storm of people thinking that it's not going to be safe for some reason.
Mm-hmm. I think the whole pandemic has been politicized. So naturally, the one solution, the most effective solution that you're going to get to it is also going to be politicized. So thanks, everyone, for doing that. No one in particular, but thank you for politicizing the primary solution of the pandemic.
Get this guy out so he doesn't keep screaming.
You're good. Obviously, the whole it alters DNA thing, you're going to be... I've seen all sorts of crazy shit. anytime you look up anything on YouTube pertaining particularly to DNA vaccines, oh, that's adorable. I love it. Clippy joining us for the show. She offers a lot of really useful insight, you know?
That's true. She's very smart for her age.
I agree, Clippy. I agree. Anyway, I've seen lots of the general consensus on DNA vaccines. Maybe part of the issue is that it's called a DNA vaccine because that just sounds really scary. Like,
yeah,
it's not a very marketable term, is it? But what else can you call it? If you called it something like a gene vaccine, then that would really freak people out.
Yeah, no, that would be worse.
I just think I've seen, anytime you look up DNA vaccines on YouTube, I just did a cursory glance of a whole bunch of different videos. Some of these videos going back maybe even 7 to 8 years, because DNA vaccines, like I said, are a relatively new concept, but not completely alien by now. We've used DNA vaccines to treat West Nile virus in horses. And the way that was done was basically you took a strand of RNA. RNA is very unstable. You produce DNA from a piece of RNA, and then you convert that RNA into complementary DNA. It's all very scientific, very specific mumbo jumbo, but there is a process behind it. They take certain parts of the RNA, they split it, and then they feed it into a big tube, I guess you want to call it that. That's the most succinct analogy I can make. Obviously, I'm not a molecular biologist, but I'm just kind of looking at it based off of the layman's notes that I took. They put a whole bunch of these strands together in a tube. Some of the successful parts of this vaccine strand stick, and the ones that aren't useful don't stick. So this is something that takes a pretty lengthy amount of time, and it's not just something that just kind of, they can't just take a piece of mRNA and just go, oh, here we go, and just, that's not how it works. Some people are concerned about the idea that this mRNA would get injected into the human body and then it would alter genetic code. Well, mRNA isn't capable of altering genetic code anyway.
Right.
So that's kind of,
it doesn't enter the nucleus where the DNA is located.
Right.
It's like it's affecting the surface of the cell, not the internal components.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a reason like that isn't enough for people who aren't really willing to think about it very scientifically, and they want to just be told, like in plain English, like why it's safe. And it's very hard to do that when you're dealing with such a new, complicated process.
Extremely complicated.
And another thing is, the way I understand the process is that once the new genetic material is introduced to modify the RNA to produce the spike proteins, the genetic material that was introduced by the vaccine is destroyed as if it was a piece of coronavirus. So it's not like there's leftover stuff in your cells because they injected you with something that's going to like linger there. It's just teaching your cell how to create a defense to the spike protein that's on the surface of a coronavirus cell, and then it's like basically destroyed by the cells that it created.
My understanding of it is they take a piece of mRNA. The mRNA is surrounded in this thing called a lipid nanoparticle. The lipid nanoparticle is what allows the piece of mRNA to enter into a cell. Now, the spike protein that you were talking about that exists on a COVID virus particle, they work backwards on that, and then they find the mRNA. And so when this mRNA, or duplication of it, or whatever you want to call it, however they extract it, the methodology of it is obviously very, very complicated. But once it enters into a cell, the cell, at some point, ribosomes are created, making proteins. And then eventually B cells, macrophages, which are white blood cells, is just a scientific term for white blood cells, and other cells like T helper cells, the T helper are created, and T helper cells release cytokines. I don't know how to pronounce that. Doesn't matter. Which tell other B cells. And if you did like just a cursory glance of like how the immune system works, you'll probably recognize some of these terms. I, of course, don't that much because it's been a long time since I took biology in high school. But they tell the B cells, the T cells, or the cytokines from the T cells, whatever, close enough. Tell the B cells to proliferate and differentiate into plasma cells. And so the plasma cells make antibodies that can assist in neutralizing the S protein because the antibodies attach themselves to the S protein. But the antibodies, it's kind of like a puzzle piece. If the immune system doesn't know what kind of puzzle piece to make, then obviously they can't match it to the protein on the virus, and that makes it more difficult to deal with. Mm-hmm. Afterwards, after a vaccine injection, after this is all done, there are other memory cells that are created in the body, and there are also cells that create certain proteins that will destroy other cells in the body that are infected with COVID. So if you get vaccinated and then you somehow contract the virus at a later time, the immune system is not only going to be able to recognize the virus and deal with it more effectively, but it's also going to nuke cells that are problematic, right, that get infected with COVID-2 or SARS-CoV-2. Obviously, you don't want those cells in your body because they've been compromised. Now, of course, when you say that it's destroying cells that are infected with COVID in your system, then people are going to freak out and they're like, oh my God, it's going to, that's literally what the immune system does. If you get infected with a pathogen, if the pathogen spreads to other cells and the immune system goes, get rid of that. And then that's literally just how the immune system works. But of course, you know, if you say certain things in certain contexts, then people get freaked out, and if they don't understand the bigger picture of it, then I understand it's easy to get misled by bad actors on this topic.
And to an extent, we're just explaining how the immune system works and how vaccinations work in general. But you know, people are a lot more concerned about it now than ever, and especially because the phase 3 testing has been a lot shorter than it usually is, and so people are still worried, and they have, you know, some justification to be worried that there's only been like 2-3 months of phase 3 trials for the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines, whereas usually it's like 6 to 8 months. They're like, you know, the fastest vaccine ever was mumps, and that was 4 years. Mm-hmm. And now this has been like 12, 18 months. And I think I understand why people are worried, but at the same time, there's a reason why it happened so fast. And there's also a reason why we're not using Sputnik, because that came out too early. But Russia felt like it was safe enough. It was like, if Russia, I guess my point is here, if Russia felt like it was safe enough to take the risk months ago, and we've had months of proper testing since then, it's hard to imagine. It could have like minor long-term effects that we're not seeing yet, but there's nothing particularly different or excessively dangerous about like the contents of this vaccine versus the contents of any other vaccine. There's no reason to think it would have any significant negative long-term effects. And one thing I wanted to point out about the math when we're talking about efficacy, because there are two big things to worry about, and that's efficacy and safety. These vaccines claim to be 95% effective, both of them. And that can basically be proven because in a 6 to 8 month phase 3 trial, you're going to have a much smaller amount of people than you have in the Pfizer trial, which was like 44,000. That's huge for a phase 3 trial. And the fact that they had so many people allowed them to hit their statistically significant numbers a lot earlier. So they got to this point already that would have usually taken them a lot more time, just because they were pumping a lot more resources into it, and they were using a lot more people.
Yeah, because it's one of the most deadly pandemics that we've had in like 100 years.
And so my real point with this is that it's true that we haven't tested it for as long, but we've tested it so much more robustly. And so there would have to be like a really unlikely, huge, dramatic, like unknown variable here for people to be completely fine for 3 months with the vaccine and then 6 months, like, oh, they like break out in hives and they die or something. Like, I
Well,
mean,
exactly.
what's really gonna happen in another
And
month or two?
that's a really good point that I don't believe the government does a good enough job of really trying to get people to understand how vaccines are developed. And I think a lot of that falls on the Department of Education. I think a lot of that falls on school curriculums. I think there's a lot of useless crap that gets taught to kids on the terms of scientific basis that doesn't really affect them in a practical sense. If we made an effort to,
We spent an entire year learning about the watershed.
yeah,
I mean, it's
like
it's important, but a whole year.
the watershed's great. I get that. Maybe if there's a once in a lifetime event where we get like a shit ton of flooding, and then suddenly that affects us on a personal level, then yeah, it's probably useful if you paid attention in science class more than other kids who were texting.
Water quality is important, but their priorities were out of whack. There's other things that we needed to worry about, like vaccine science, perhaps.
But what you mentioned with the number of the sample size is really important to talk about when it comes to the testing. It's also really important to note that in those tests, especially once you get to phase 3, those are people who get injected with a vaccine. That's not those. Yeah. It's not. You're not talking about lab rats. You're not really doing it in as much of a controlled environment. The controlled aspect of the environment is really just the statistical sampling of it. That's what's more controlled than anything else. We're not putting 100,000 people on an island out in the middle of the ocean and then giving them a vaccine. These are people that they're already among us, right? You could have walked by a guy in the grocery store that had the phase 3 version of the vaccine already, and you wouldn't have had any idea. But the point is, we have to test it in a natural environment because we're going to be giving people the vaccine in a natural environment. It doesn't make sense to study something this important to the well-being of the human race and do it in such a controlled environment to the point where it's just a matter of, it's just following the scientific method accurately. We can't just do a test on something without seeing how it works out in a natural environment. Mm-hmm. So people have had a version of the vaccine for a while now. We're just finally getting around to the point where it's like, okay, let's see if we can improve it. Is it safe? Is it effective? And then we'll give it emergency use authorization, which is a whole another thing going on with like Mark Meadows and the FDA chief that I didn't know about until today. And we can, of course, talk about that later in the show as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I lost my train of thought, but I'm going to pick it up here in a second.
I've already done that like 4 times.
Okay, so I was going to...
Which is something not a lot of people know. Like, that's a point that a lot of people make where it's like, oh, we're just guinea pigs for the U.S. government. We'll just see how it goes. Are you okay with the government using you as a test subject? It's like...
You're not really being used as a test subject. And if you have worries about that, here's what you can do. Especially if you're an older person, here's what I'll tell you. The trials that have been done so far have found that older people have had significantly less adverse reactions to the vaccine. It seems like, for one reason or another, they are just not experiencing nearly as many side effects.
Yeah, old people. Woo!
So if you're old and you're like, you're supposed to be the first to get it, you're probably not going to have any side effects. If you're like vulnerable, if you have, a history of adverse reactions to vaccines, or you're like allergic to something in them, or like you have an immunodeficiency issue, maybe wait until, the people from the phase 3 trials have had the vaccine for 6 months, which will be like spring. So maybe everyone else can get vaccinated while you wait, and that's okay. But you have to it's really a question of when you should get vaccinated, not if you should. It's like fine to wait a little bit if you feel like you're more vulnerable than the average person to have adverse reactions to this. And when we talk about adverse reactions, I think it's very important to note that nobody has had like super serious reactions to this at all so far. Mm-hmm. You've had fatigue and headache have been like the only like systemic reactions.
Those happen with the flu vaccine too.
Exactly. You've had some like mild fever that goes away after a couple days. You have like pain at the injection site. You have like some redness or swelling. Turns out that happens when you get shots, guys. Sorry to tell you. Uh, but it's like it's not like there's any super severe side effects from this. It's like normal injection side effects. And yeah, you're gonna have a couple people here and there that like have bad reactions to it. You had 2 people out of like thousands in the UK that have gotten the vaccine already that had severe allergic reactions, and they were people that have had a history of it and had like EpiPens with them and just used it and were taken to the hospital and were fine. Like, nobody's died from it. If somebody does die from it, I'm sure there will be many comorbidities involved. It's not going to be just the vaccine.
Yeah, that's something I've seen. People have been concerned because there's no ingredient list that's been released for the vaccine. They're like, oh, well, we don't know what's in it. Yeah, you do. It's a piece of mRNA from the COVID vaccine. From what?
Yeah, in terms of like
that
like
completely
the
lost
fillers,
on me there.
I guess is what they're worried about.
I guess.
But like, vaccine fillers have been a topic of debate for years, and like some vaccines do have a little bit of like aluminum in them, and people get really freaked out about that. But
and then they put aluminum foil on their rice pot and put it in the fridge. And they wrap a burrito in aluminum foil, put it in the fridge.
But it's like really not something that's going to affect. Like, the fillers are such a non-issue. They're going to affect like 0.5% of people, and you probably already know if you react badly to vaccine fillers. This is not going to be like extraordinarily different from them.
Yeah, I agree, and I think going back to one of the points we kind of mentioned at the beginning of the show is that I don't do you think this is normal? Because I don't think this is normal. Just like widespread skepticism about vaccines. I already knew, like, I mean, like, you and I are from the same state, and I'm very confused by what I'm seeing in a lot of the rural American community, where a significant portion of them that took vaccines in the past got their kids inoculated against all sorts of, like, I remember when I went to middle school, I had to get immunizations.
Right.
Or I couldn't go to school. And that's in a really conservative state like West Virginia, you know? So now it's become this, oh, well, we don't really know what's going on.
People are suddenly much more worried about it. Even though, and that's the other thing about the microchip theory that really gets me, is they're like, this is the perfect time because everybody has to get the vaccine. Everybody has to get, like, every vaccine when they're a child. Why wouldn't they just chip you when you're a kid? Like, I don't understand. And, like, it's the new generation that you'd want to chip the most, too. So why would they do it in a vaccine they're going to chip
going grandma
from the oldest down? It hasn't even been tested on kids. That's the other thing. The Pfizer trial was 16 and up. So we have no idea if it's, like...
They're going to chip your grandma in the nursing home and see what kinds of Netflix programming she watches. Going to get some really useful information to really subvert the American dream here, man.
Yeah, and oh, wow!
See, I can't get up. They're already interfering right now.
They're interfering with our elections, Greg. Yeah. But kids are the least vulnerable to it, so they can get vaccinated last. They're fine.
Fuck them kids. It's really weird, man. I don't know. I've just kind of gone along with it, like, okay, I mean, if people aren't going to take it, they're not going to fucking take it. See, I'm not in the camp of mandatory vaccinations. I'm in the camp of, if you don't get vaccinations, you're significantly ill-informed and out of the loop, and maybe a little stupid. Is that okay to call people stupid on an online show? Is that okay? Is that wrong?
Yeah, I think so.
Oops. Sorry about that.
No. I think it's okay, is what I was saying.
It's frustrating to see, because there's no, like, The problem is that so here's one point that I had that resounded with a lot of my liberal friends, which of course is going to give more credit to the other side's argument. Trump has tried to, and I know we just said the T word in the middle of the show that's not supposed to be about Trump, which is indicative of me having Trump derangement syndrome, which I don't, but people are going to think that. Anyway.
You got to admit it. One of these days.
I'm coming to terms with it. First step is acceptance. Anyway, Trump has really tried to make the vaccine like his thing. Mm-hmm. He's really tried to like in a way co-opt
Operation Warp
credit.
Speed. We made the Pfizer vaccine.
Yeah, that's like us, man. And I saved you, Grandma. That's Trump. Trump did it. So you're welcome. And then Pfizer comes in and they're like, actually, dude, you didn't have that much to do with it. Don't listen to this guy. He just kind of gave us I don't even think it was a funding thing. I don't even think it's that directly related.
No, I don't think they did fund Pfizer. But I mean, I think that's why Trump or Mark Meadows or whoever exactly did it pressured the FDA director to approve Pfizer on Friday, because they were desperate to get a couple final wins in. Mm-hmm. Like they're doing, I don't know, Trump's doing a bunch of crazy stuff right now, taking Sudan off the terror list and stuff, but that's
regardless,
a whole other podcast.
Trump is responsible for saving us from COVID by really doing a good job with the vaccine progress, and also don't take the vaccine because it's a Bill Gates microchip.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad he hasn't at least been going. He hasn't outright said don't take the vaccine yet, which I'm expecting.
I don't get it. Really. I really don't. Maybe it has something to do with Joe Biden winning. I guess.
Joe Biden wants you to get the vaccine, so you can't get it.
But Donald Trump wanted you to get it too, right? Donald Trump is the reason that it happened. Donald Trump is the reason that it happened. Now Joe Biden says get a vaccine, but that means don't take it. It's completely all over the goddamn place. My brain is fine. I don't think anyone with the working brain wouldn't get it fried, because it makes no goddamn sense.
You asked me a minute ago if I thought this was normal, or like, and I had mentioned that skepticism is like a lot higher than it usually is with vaccines. I think there is an or a growing anti-vax movement. You see it with a lot of like Facebook moms.
I remember you telling me about that, and I thought that was I was like, no fucking way.
They're really well-meaning, but there's a big community, like, and it's sad, but there's also just a science denial culture. Trump's contributed to that a lot, but I mean, like, you're thinking about something like climate change. I don't want to say climate change is real and the vaccine is real and associate those two. So if somebody believes in one, they don't believe in the other. But it's just another situation of like people selectively believing what like pretty objective scientific evidence to believe because they're scared or it fits their agenda. I think a lot of people are genuinely scared about the vaccine. They're worried that it hasn't been tested enough, and when Trump threatens the FDA director's job, that doesn't help instill confidence for sure.
Well, didn't the communist utopia of Canada, led by the great Supreme Leader Justin Trudeau, also approve the vaccine, which means it's okay to take it?
Right.
So actually, the Trump administration is creating a huge victory for the American left. Thanks, Trump.
Well, and the UK's approved it, and they got people getting shots. I think it's just like we're very proud of the FDA. We have the best food and drugs ever. Nobody's gonna tell us what drugs to take, and we're not gonna ship drugs from anywhere, even though it would make so much more sense to. People are very concerned about the reputation of the FDA, and it makes sense to be, because that's something that we should be proud of, is our ability to properly vet food and drugs. And I think it was a double-edged sword. It's definitely a risk versus reward scenario where we kind of should have just let the FDA take its extra week to approve the vaccine. But getting the vaccine out a week early, it's probably not going to make any difference that extra week, and it's going to save.
I think it's so statistically
thousands of lives.
So statistically insignificant, especially if you like the methodology of how a vaccine is tested, like we were talking about earlier in the show.
Mhm.
We've already had so many people walking around with a vaccine to begin with. That's how a phase 3 test works. You have to test it on a normal population. What are you going to get from another week of data? I get it from a scientific point of view.
You're going to get slightly more confident, but like we're already pretty confident.
Yeah.
So, you know, I don't know. I see why people would feel less confident because of moves like that, but at the same time, you know,
I'm not saying barge into people's house.
The risk of letting COVID continue is so much larger than any potential risk of vaccine. The fact is, we still are having like 200,000 cases a day. We're breaking crazy records. The last time we recorded one of these, we were like thinking it was insane that we were on 140, 150,000. Now we hit like 214,000 the other day. We hit 3,500 deaths in one day. It's like the number one
half of the
cause
COVID
of death
material
in
in
the
that
United States.
show, half of the COVID material in that episode is already out of date.
And that's crazy. We're having literally one 9/11 of deaths a day. Like, that's so much.
And the one argument that I
remember how 9/11 was a big deal.
Yeah. And the one argument that I was willing to, kind of let go to a certain extent was, well, a lot of people die from heart disease. We don't close down McDonald's. Okay, fine. But one day in particular, we had the amount of COVID deaths surpass the amount of heart disease deaths within a given day.
We're having that more and more days now. The average deaths from heart disease are 2,300. I'm just saying with COVID, we hit 3,500 one day. That's like 150% of heart disease. That's fucking crazy. COVID, a virus, should not be killing more people than heart disease or cancer. They're the fucking big killers.
I agree.
That's crazy. Get vaccinated. Jesus Christ.
Please. But you can't force people to do it, because then you're gonna get an authoritarian regime, and then you're gonna do you're probably gonna do like a China kind of situation where they're like,
we have mandatory vaccinations for school. I mean, like.
Yeah, I mean, we mentioned that about the West Virginia Department of Education mandates that. And like we said earlier, that's still a very conservative state that mandated that.
Because this vaccine might only last for a couple of years. Like, it might not be like a long-term one. And that happens with a lot of vaccines. You get like one that gives short-term immunity, and then as the science continues, maybe 10 years later, you get one that's full immunity. Like many years.
I think it's indicative of where we're at politically and culturally, that the most effective solution to the problem that everybody has been bitching and moaning about, which I've been bitching and moaning about it. I'm not having any fun with this shit either, man.
I want to go out again.
Nobody's having fun with this. Do you think I want to just like sit inside and fucking hermit for an entire year straight? That's fucking boring. I went to the beach in the summer anyway. Maybe that wasn't a good idea. I don't know. But even when I went to the beach in the summer, the rate of cases that were going out was exponentially lower than what we got to in November. And what I was doing back then was considered irresponsible by a lot of people. Now, I think that to a certain extent, a lot of the scientific advice in terms of how to deal with it was a little bit fucking jumbled and messed up, and there needed to be a more concise point made to the American public about what to do in this situation. But guess what? A lot of that falls on the White House. And the White House didn't do a very good job of that. That's got nothing to do with whatever fucking trade deal or, whatever other policy that Trump did. I'm not even talking about any other policies that he wrote or advocated for, or any stupid shit that he tweeted or stupid shit he said on a podium. I'm just talking about the pandemic response. And the pandemic response in this country fucking sucked compared to other developed nations. That's just an observable fact.
And the CDC fucked up too, and the Democrats were not willing to compromise with the Republicans on a stimulus bill. There's fault in a lot of places. But you're right that, you know, the White House fucked up on this. The CDC got its messaging jumbled, and Congress gridlocking again. Who fucking knew, dude? Big surprise.
Well, you can't say anything about Nancy Pelosi on Twitter or you'll get yelled at, Pat, so good luck.
Nancy Pelosi needs to retire.
God, we could have a whole different show about Congress's response. Just fucking God. But I think the show will run too long.
Hopefully a new stimulus bill will be coming soon, guys. Hold out. You know, they're fighting for that $300
I don't know. I'm not
$600.
I'm not confident. But
I'm not either, but I'm
that's
hopeful
why a vaccine is important. So fucking get it. God damn it.
The quicker we get everybody vaccinated, the quicker everybody can go back to work, the quicker the stock market goes back up and jobs come back. You know, like all of the...
Are you saying to take the vaccine to help the stock market, you corporatist?
I don't know.
See, this is why the neoliberal media wants you to take the vaccine. I mean, we have hard left and hard right people looking at the vaccine and going, oh, this is a conspiracy against poor country whites. Oh, this is a conspiracy against poor urban blacks. It's like,
and we said it.
What the fuck is going on?
We said it on the last episode about the election, and I'll say it on this episode too. There's so many independent reviewers. There are boards of people that are working to make sure that the vaccine is safe and effective. And there's just no way around that. And it's amazing that people act like that does not happen.
Guys, we're not telling you what to do. Just do your research and form a logical conclusion based off of that research. Please?
Yeah.
That's all I'm asking.
I would recommend getting vaccinated.
Just try.
I would say there's so many good reasons to.
If you think the vaccine is gonna,
economy.
Yeah, if you think the vaccine is gonna alter your genetic DNA, I would suggest looking up, you know, some literature on that and see where you come up with it. You don't have to get it from a fucking, you know, if you Google it and then it's like, oh, well, this is a Reuters article, I don't trust the mainstream media, then get it from the mouth of somebody who works in immunology. I'll put sources in the description. I'll, you know, I will communicate in reason with some of you. You know, if a lot of you just want to come in here and talk a bunch of shit, then I'll probably talk shit back.
Greg, they won't believe it till it's on Newsmax.
Oh, God bless. Anyway, got anything else, Pat? I'm out. I'm going to watch football. And hopefully get to attend a football game again if we get a fucking vaccine distributed.
I'm going to get my arm poked as soon as possible, and I'm going to be out there living life again with that 95% effective. And get your second shot. That's my last note. These are all 2-shot vaccines. Fucking go back for your second shot. Don't be like, oh, I got one. Maybe it'll be like 30% effective. Get your second one. That's the point. It should be like 2 or 3 weeks later. You'll get a second one.
I think we'll wrap it up on that. Thanks for coming out to the cookout, Pat, and everyone who watched this. You're invited to the next one. And I'll see you all on the next one. That was a great closer. Totally won't edit that out. Stay safe, everybody.